You're buying barbecue sauce like a person who hasn't looked at the bottle in 5 years. The label shows you what you want to see: flame-grilled authenticity, slow-cooked tradition, simple ingredients, but the reality sitting inside that jar is something else entirely. And here's the thing that matters. You're probably not alone in this blind spot. Millions of people grab the same bottles every summer, convinced they're getting real barbecue sauce, when in fact they're buying a product engineered to taste like barbecue sauce while containing almost nothing that actually comes from a barbecue pit. This summer, before you stock up, you need to understand what's really happening in that aisle. The barbecue sauce category has a hidden architecture. On the surface, it looks simple: tomatoes, spices, maybe some vinegar. But what's actually happened is that barbecue sauce has become one of the most heavily engineered condiment categories in the grocery store. It's not an accident, it's strategy. The biggest players in this space have spent decades figuring out how to deliver that addictive, tangy sweet flavor profile that makes people reach for it again and again without actually building it from real ingredients. Instead, they've built it from shortcuts. And the visual language on the label, the rustic mason jars, the wood fire imagery, the heritage branding, all of it is designed to create a confidence in your mind that contradicts what's actually in the bottle. Let's start by looking at what makes this category so deceptive. Barbecue sauce is not required to list its water content the way juice is. It's not required to break down its sugar load the same way a candy label is. And because it's positioned as a condiment rather than a primary food, people apply less scrutiny to it. You'll use 2 tablespoons on a plate of chicken, so the idea is that the label details don't matter as much. But consider this. A single serving of certain mainstream barbecue sauces contains more sugar than a can of Coke. You're not consuming less of it, you're consuming it less consciously. That's the gap. The first major pattern you need to understand is viscosity manufacturing. Real barbecue sauce, made traditionally, gets its thickness from the natural pectin in tomatoes and the reduction that happens when you simmer ingredients for hours. But simmering is expensive. It takes time. It requires real heat and real ingredients. So instead, manufacturers use a combination of modified food starch, xanthan gum, and sometimes guar gum to create that cling and thickness instantly. These aren't bad ingredients, necessarily. But they're not ingredients you chose. They're ingredients chosen for you because they're cheaper and faster than the real method. The sauce feels authentic in your mouth, but it's been engineered to feel that way. That's not transparency. That's simulation. Now let's look at the 7 brands that exemplify these problems most clearly, and why each one represents a different compromise that should concern you. Kraft Original Barbecue Sauce sits in the #1 position because it's the bestseller that most visibly illustrates the sugar engineering problem. This sauce contains high fructose corn syrup as its primary ingredient after water. The label reads tomato concentrate, water, sugar, and spices, but what arrives in your mouth is primarily sweetness. The viscosity is entirely gum-based. The flavor profile, that distinctive Kraft taste, is built on a combination of high fructose corn syrup, caramel color, and a proprietary spice blend that includes more sugar in disguise. A 2-tablespoon serving contains 17 grams of sugar. For reference, that's nearly equivalent to a Snickers bar. Most people who buy this sauce think they're buying a tomato-based condiment. They're actually buying a sweetened syrup with tomato notes. The branding works because Kraft owns the emotional real estate of backyard barbecue, not because the product delivers on that promise. Heinz Thick and Slow Cooked represents the premium illusion. The name and packaging suggest a product made through traditional slow cooking methods. The bottle is heavier. The label uses darker colors and heritage imagery. The price is higher than Kraft, but the ingredient list betrays this positioning immediately. Like most Heinz sauces, it relies on high fructose corn syrup, distilled vinegar, and a laundry list of gums and starches for texture. What you're paying premium dollars for is the Heinz brand name and the psychological comfort of Heinz tomato products. The actual formulation is not materially different from budget alternatives. You've paid more for the same engineering, housed in better packaging. Sweet Baby Ray's is the masterclass in flavor engineering without substance. This brand has built a massive following by creating an almost addictive flavor profile, intensely sweet with a vinegar kick that cuts through just enough to feel balanced. The problem is that this balance is entirely achieved through chemical proportioning, not ingredient quality. The sauce is 30% sugar by weight. It contains soy sauce, Worcestershire sauce, and a spice blend that is largely sugar and caramel coloring. The Ray of Sunshine branding suggests natural, simple American food. The reality is a carefully orchestrated formula designed to trigger flavor addiction. People buy this sauce and use it on everything, not because it's versatile, but because the flavor engineering makes them want to. Stubbs' legendary barbecue sauce is particularly deceptive because Stubbs has positioned itself as the authentic Texas alternative. The brand has a story. It originated at a real barbecue restaurant in Austin. That story is true, but the sauce you buy at the supermarket is not made in that restaurant. It's mass-produced, and it's been reformulated for shelf stability and profit margin. The ingredient list includes high fructose corn syrup, caramel color, and the usual gum thickeners. The sauce is missing the depth you'd expect from a product claiming Texas barbecue heritage. It tastes more like a sweetened commercial product wearing a Texan costume. The brand leverage, the authenticity story, is doing all the heavy lifting. The product itself is a standard industrial formulation. Open Pit Original is the classic formula that has been in stores for decades, and it remains one of the most heavily engineered sauces on the shelf. High fructose corn syrup, water, tomato concentrate, and then a complex blend of starches, gums, and flavor compounds. The sauce is bright orange-red, unnaturally consistent, and engineered to remain shelf-stable for years. The label promises true barbecue flavor, but the flavor is entirely constructed. There's no complexity, no depth, no hint of actual slow cooking or fermentation. Just a flat, sweet, engineered taste that hits your palate with immediate recognition because you've been conditioned to expect that exact flavor profile since childhood. That familiarity is mistaken for quality. Lily's Q Smokehouse style represents another premium illusion, but with a cleaner branding message. This sauce markets itself as made with no high fructose corn syrup, and it delivers on that claim. Instead, it uses cane sugar. The label plays up the no artificial flavors messaging. But here's where the deception becomes more subtle. The sauce is still engineered. It still uses xanthan gum and modified food starch. It still relies on caramel coloring and concentrate rather than actual cooked tomatoes. What Lily's has done is reposition the same engineering under a cleaner label. You feel better buying it, but the product is still a heavily manipulated formulation. The difference between Lily's and Kraft is primarily marketing positioning and the sugar source. The fundamental architecture is identical. Bullseye Original rounds out this group as the barbecue sauce that exemplifies the do-everything-for-everyone approach. This sauce is designed to work on ribs, brisket, chicken, and pulled pork. It's thick enough to cling, sweet enough to satisfy the American palate, and engineered to be shelf-stable enough that a single jar can last in someone's pantry for years. That versatility comes at a cost. The sauce has almost no distinctive character. It's formulated to offend no one and excite no one. The ingredient list is the typical industrial formula: high fructose corn syrup, tomato concentrate, gums, starches, caramel color. The sauce is built for consistency across millions of jars, not for flavor complexity or ingredient integrity. It tastes the same bottle after bottle, year after year, which is exactly what the manufacturer intends. Now here's what you need to understand about why this pattern exists across all 7 of these products. The barbecue sauce category is built on a single economic principle: the lowest cost to achieve the highest flavor intensity while maintaining shelf stability. Real barbecue sauce, the kind you'd make at home or get from a genuine pit restaurant, is expensive. It requires real ingredients. It requires time. It requires refrigeration. It has a limited shelf life. None of that works at the industrial scale, so manufacturers have solved for cost by replacing the expensive parts with cheap alternatives. Real tomatoes become tomato concentrate plus water. Real slow cooking becomes gum-thickened liquid cooked once. Real spice becomes flavor compounds and caramel color. Real fermentation becomes acid and sweetness mixed in proportions that taste vaguely familiar. The sugar engineering is the most visible part of this strategy because sweetness masks the absence of depth. If you add enough sugar and vinegar to a basic mixture of water and tomato concentrate, people will recognize it as barbecue sauce because that's what barbecue sauce tastes like in their memory. They won't ask for complexity or fermentation or depth because those aren't part of the category template they've been conditioned to expect. The engineering works because it targets taste recognition, not satisfaction. The second pattern is the branding reality gap. Almost every major barbecue sauce brand uses visual language and storytelling that contradicts its formulation. Kraft uses Americana imagery. Heinz uses heritage and tradition. Stubbs uses authentic Texas pit barbecue credibility. Lily's uses clean label health positioning. But none of these brands are delivering on the promise embedded in their narrative. They're all delivering the same basic product: a sweetened tomato concentrate with gum-based texture and artificial complexity. The label's job is to make you not notice this contradiction. The third pattern is the absence of actual smoked flavor. Real barbecue sauce should contain evidence of smoke, either from actual smoke exposure or from smoke flavoring compounds that are clearly listed. Most mainstream sauces skip this entirely. There's no smoke note, no char, no depth of roasted flavors. What you get is sweetness and vinegar. The branding suggests smokehouse origins, but the formula suggests a kitchen without any fire at all. Here's where this matters practically. When you buy one of these 7 sauces, you're not getting what the branding implies. You're not getting a product designed for flavor or quality. You're getting a product designed for cost efficiency and brand recognition. The sauce is fine if you understand what it is. The problem is that most people don't. They think they're buying barbecue sauce. They're actually buying sweetened tomato concentrate with gum thickeners and flavor engineering. That's not just a label issue. That's a fundamental misalignment between what the packaging promises and what the product delivers. Now let's shift to what changes when you understand what real barbecue sauce looks like. Real barbecue sauce has a different architecture altogether. Instead of starting with water and concentrate, it starts with actual cooked tomatoes or tomato sauce. Instead of relying on gums for thickness, it relies on reduced cooking time and natural pectin. Instead of using high fructose corn syrup as the primary sweetener, it uses sugar in smaller quantities. or sometimes honey, molasses, or maple syrup in quantities where those flavors actually matter. And instead of masking depth with sugar, real barbecue sauce has actual depth, layers of flavor from spices that are present in meaningful quantities, from fermented elements like Worcestershire sauce, from acidity that comes from actual vinegar reduction, not just added acid. The 5 better options I'm about to walk you through share a common trait: they're built on ingredient clarity instead of engineering opacity. They use fewer additives because they rely on real ingredients to deliver flavor and texture. They're more expensive because they cost more to make. And they taste different because they're designed to taste like something real, not like the category template. Primal Kitchen Organic Barbecue Sauce represents the clean ingredient alternative. This sauce uses tomato puree as its base, not concentrate. It uses dates and organic coconut sugar for sweetness, not high-fructose corn syrup. The thickening comes from cooking reduction and xanthan gum used minimally, not from a complex blend of starches and gums. The spice list is actual spices. You can identify them, not a proprietary blend hiding sugar and caramel coloring. The sauce is thinner than mainstream alternatives because it's not engineered for maximum cling. It tastes more complex because that complexity comes from actual ingredients, not flavor engineering. A 2-tablespoon serving contains 6 grams of sugar, less than 1/3 of what Kraft contains. The price is higher, but you're paying for different ingredients, not just a different label. Bachan's Japanese barbecue sauce takes a completely different approach to the category. Instead of trying to be an American smoke or pit sauce, it's positioned as a Japanese-inspired glaze. This is actually an advantage because it breaks you out of the expectation that all barbecue sauce must taste like Kraft. The ingredient list reads like something you might actually cook with: mirin, soy sauce, sake, ginger, garlic. There are no gums listed. The sweetness comes from mirin and the natural sugars in the ingredients, not from added high-fructose corn syrup or even cane sugar. The texture is achieved through cooking and reduction. The flavor is complex and actually improves with how you use it. It caramelizes differently on ribs than on chicken. The sauce is significantly more expensive than mainstream alternatives, but it's expensive because the ingredients are expensive, not because the brand is expensive. Stubbs Barbecue Sauce, and here's where this gets interesting, has a separate line called Stubbs Spice Rub and Marinade that actually delivers on the Stubbs authenticity promise more effectively than their sauce does. But if we're talking liquid sauce, the better option is their no sugar added line, which contains erythritol instead of high-fructose corn syrup. The sauce still uses some thickening gums, but the formulation is materially different from their regular sauce. The ingredients are cleaner, the sugar load is lower. It's not a perfect sauce, but it's a genuine alternative within the same brand structure. This matters because sometimes the better option isn't a completely different brand, it's a different product line from the same manufacturer. Bronx Sauce is a smaller brand that operates from a completely different business model. It's refrigerated, not shelf-stable. It's made in small batches, not industrial vats. The ingredient list is genuinely short: tomato paste, vinegar, spices, honey, salt. There are no gums, there are no starches. The sauce is thick because it's cooked down, not because it's engineered. The flavor is assertive because the spices are actually present, not because sweetness is masking absence. The shelf life is measured in months, not years, because it's not engineered for indefinite stability. The price reflects this reality. It's expensive because it costs more to make. But when you taste it, you understand immediately why someone would pay more. This is what barbecue sauce tastes like when you remove the industrial engineering. James Beard award-winning Dinosaur Barbecue Sauce sits in a similar category. It's made in smaller batches. The ingredient list is clean and intentional. The sauce is based on tomato paste and actual spices, not on concentrate and flavor engineering. The sweetness comes from molasses and sugar in proportions where those flavors contribute to the overall profile, not where they dominate it. The sauce is thinner than mainstream alternatives because it doesn't rely on gum thickeners. It actually tastes like something you could make at home if you had the time and knew what you were doing. The brand credibility comes from reputation and actual product quality, not from heritage storytelling and emotional branding. Whistle Pig Barbecue Sauce rounds out this group as an example of a newer brand that's been built on the principle of ingredient clarity from the start. The sauce is made with tomato paste, apple juice concentrate, vinegar, and actual spices. No artificial flavors, no high-fructose corn syrup, no complex blend of gums and starches. The texture is achieved through cooking reduction. The sweetness is present but not dominating. The flavor is nuanced because the focus is on ingredient quality, not on engineering intensity. What these 5 sauces share is this: they're built on a different set of assumptions about what barbecue sauce should be. They assume that people will pay more for ingredient clarity. They assume that flavor complexity is worth more than flavor intensity. They assume that shelf stability matters less than ingredient integrity. They assume that the job of a label is to tell you what's in the bottle, not to create confidence that contradicts what's actually in the bottle. The buying rule that emerges from this comparison is straightforward. Check the ingredient list before the brand name. In mainstream barbecue sauces, high fructose corn syrup or cane sugar will appear in the first 3 ingredients. It will be followed by a list of thickening gums and starches. The spice list, if it's listed at all, will be vague and proprietary. In better formulated sauces, tomato-based ingredients appear first, followed by specific spices you can identify, followed by sweeteners in smaller quantities. Gum thickeners, if present, are used sparingly. The ingredient list is shorter. Nothing is hiding behind proprietary blending or vague terminology. The second rule is understanding that price correlates with formulation, not just branding. If a sauce is significantly cheaper than alternatives, it's cheaper because it uses cheaper ingredients and cheaper manufacturing methods. That's not always bad. Sometimes you want to spend less money on a condiment. But you should be aware of what you're buying. If a sauce costs twice as much, you're paying for different ingredients, not for better marketing. The third rule is recognizing that sensory experience should match ingredient quality. A sauce made from real tomatoes and actual spices will taste more complex and nuanced. It will taste different on different proteins. It will improve with cooking time rather than just coating instantly. If a sauce tastes identical every time you use it, engineered to be perfectly consistent, that consistency is a feature of industrial manufacturing, not a feature of ingredient quality. This summer, as you're shopping for barbecue sauce, you have a choice. You can grab one of the 7 mainstream sauces and enjoy the familiarity of a flavor profile you've been conditioned to expect. There's nothing wrong with that choice if you make it consciously. Or you can reach for one of the alternatives and experience what barbecue sauce tastes like when the focus is on ingredient clarity instead of engineering efficiency. The difference isn't subtle. Once you taste what real depth and complexity in barbecue sauce feels like, the mainstream alternatives start to taste like what they are. Sweetened tomato concentrate with gum-based texture and flavor compounds designed to be recognizable rather than memorable. The wider lesson here is that the barbecue sauce category is not unique. This same pattern, heritage branding masking industrial engineering, sugar intensity masking ingredient weakness, gum-based texture replacing real cooking, proprietary blending hiding straightforward sweetening, exists across condiments, sauces, dressings, and hundreds of other categories that most people don't scrutinize closely. You apply this same label reading discipline to pasta sauce, to ketchup, to salad dressing, and suddenly the grocery store starts to look different. You start to see the gap between what the label promises and what the ingredient list delivers. That's not cynicism. That's awareness. What are you buying this summer? Which of these sauces have you used for years without looking at the ingredient list? And more importantly, once you understand what's actually in your regular sauce, does the price difference to a better alternative feel unreasonable? Drop your current barbecue sauce brand in the comments. Look at that ingredient list tonight, and let's talk about what you find.